And my Instagram page started out as a fitness journey. So it started out with sort of an external exploration, trying to get really in shape and sharing about that. And slowly over time, the more that I peeled back layers and the more that I shared what was coming up for me, the more that I realized that my journey was actually meant to be a journey inward. And somewhere along that journey, I found out that I was an introvert, and I started to just sort of share what was coming up for me as I was learning and meeting new people and exploring new concepts. Um, and I think I would say about a year and a half ago, I finally realized that I was an introvert, and it was like the biggest part of me.
What's up, everybody? This is Terrence Lee, aka the Introvert Leader with Quiet Voice, Fearless Mind, a podcast where we help introverts to reach their full potential. And I have a very, very special guest today. I think that social media is very powerful. I've been able to make a lot of really good connections with people online, and really in a way that I never would have thought, because I was never really big into being online, to be honest. And some of the people I've been meeting have just been so interesting. And this is one of those people. I first connected with Stephanie on Instagram. And ever since then, we've been able to just share information. I've been seeing her different posts, the things that she talks about. And she has a very interesting perspective. So I'm very excited to welcome Stephanie, aka the Queen of Self-Improvement, to Quiet Voice, Fearless Mind. Stephanie, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for that introduction. And I love what you said about not really being big on social media, because before I started all of this, I was the same way. I thought social media was just like, was weird. I didn't understand it. And yet here I am on a podcast with somebody that I met on social media. So life is weird.
Exactly. Yeah, I was the same way. Like everybody was on all the social media apps and doing all of that, and it just wasn't my thing for a while. But it's weird the way all that turns around. So yeah, so awesome.
100%.
Yeah, so I appreciate you being on here, Stephanie. So I want to ask you, because when I first saw your page and we first got connected, I thought that your title, Journey of an Introvert. I just think that's really interesting. So, what made you create Journey of an Introvert? What is Journey of an Introvert about?
Ooh, I love that question. So when I first started this Instagram a couple years ago, I it was at the beginning of COVID, and I did not even know that I was an introvert at the time. I just thought that I was, this millennial woman going through the motions of life, trying to figure life out. Um, and my Instagram page started out as a fitness journey. So it started out with sort of an external exploration, trying to get really in shape and sharing about that. And slowly over time, the more that I peeled back layers and the more that I shared what was coming up for me, the more that I realized that my journey was actually meant to be a journey inward. And somewhere along that journey, I found out that I was an introvert, and I started to just sort of share what was coming up for me as I was learning and meeting new people and exploring new concepts. Um, and I think I would say about a year and a half ago, I finally realized that I was an introvert, and it was like the biggest part of me. So I kind of landed on Journey of an Introvert by accident. Um, I realized that this was just a story that I wanted to tell as it unfolded, and I felt like um, since I was going inward, why not just call it Journey of an Introvert? Because that's essentially what this
Wow. Okay, so I have so many questions. That is
is.
that is really intriguing to me. You started out on a journey about fitness, and you
Mhm.
ended up finding something out about yourself you didn't realize was there.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting, and something that you said really hit home for me when you talked about COVID and finding out you were an introvert. I've actually heard a few people say that.
Okay.
Coworkers of mine, friends of mine, where they're people that I just always assumed were a lot more extroverted because the way they carried themselves, the way they kind of expressed themselves, and a lot of them they started telling me over the past year or so because they're aware that I do introvert leader, and they would say, Terrence, I think I'm an introvert. Like, I've had a few people say that. So, like, what for you was the moment, or I guess, when did that shift happen? Like, when did you start to look inward and start to realize, like, hey, I may be more introverted than I thought I was?
So I think the best way to answer that question is to kind of start at the beginning. So when we started COVID, I was about to get married to my high school sweetheart. I was at a career, like a very fancy 9 to 5 career. I was in great shape. I had all the things on the outside, like I checked off all the boxes. And I just was not happy. I felt like I was living somebody else's life. I had everything on paper, but I could not for the life of me figure out why I was so just lost and just uncomfortable. And so I think during COVID, I started to realize, like, I'm attaching all of these other people's narratives and all these other people's stories to myself, and that's why I'm not happy. And so when I started to realize that I didn't really actually know myself, I didn't know anything about who I
Hmm.
was because I spent
Hmm.
so much time just, you know, saying, okay, this person said this career is great, and that person said I'd be happy if I was, in great physical shape, and I just had all of these things, but I didn't have any understanding of my own internal world. And so I think what really revealed to me that I am, in fact, an introvert is once I started actually asking myself questions, and once I started asking, who is Stephanie? Like, what does Stephanie care about? What does Stephanie value? What do I believe? And the more I asked those questions, the more questions came up. Um, and I learned that the only way to truly find answers to these questions was to continue going inward. Um, I actually learned earlier this year that the word introversion means to turn inward. And I think discovering that combined with what I was doing and just continuing to peel back all of these layers revealed to me that, okay, I am an introvert. And the more I go inward and find out about myself, the happier I'm becoming on the outside.
Hmm. Did you learn anything about yourself that was surprising? Like, did you learn
Oh,
anything as you were
God.
doing that inner work and you were beginning to go inward? Because I know something about that. I started to go inward a lot during COVID as well. Because you
Hmm.
don't have we didn't have as many of the distractions, right? Like,
Right.
when you're going out all the time, or you have friends, family, work, all these different things. And during that time, we were all kind of in this state of lockdown, and a lot of people were forced to deal with themselves, I feel like.
Right.
So, is there anything when you did that work that you like it shocked you? It's like, wow, I didn't realize this about Stephanie, or I didn't know this. This is something that's like a revelation. Like, was there anything like that?
Oh, God, so much. Where do I start? I've learned that, I always thought that I was like awkward and weird and like just super shy. And I've learned that I'm really not, actually. And I've learned that those those things were all just stories that I told myself to protect myself. Like, those were layers of defense. Um, I've learned that I'm just my own quirky, weird person, but that doesn't make me somebody that other people won't like. I just learned that it's okay to be myself, I think. And I think for the longest time, I had this story that, like, if I show people who I really am and if I say what I really think, people aren't going to like me. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned is the more real I am and the more authentic I am, the more that people like me. Even though I'm so quirky, I'm such a goofball, I have such a strange way of looking at things, but people like that. So I think that's been the most surprising for me.
Isn't that awesome? Like the authenticity, right?
Hmm.
Like when you're just yourself and you're comfortable with it. What's so weird, I can totally identify with that, Stephanie, because for so long, like I thought that people wouldn't like me as much if I was quieter because I had more of a reserved nature, especially if I'm around like new people, new environments. And so at times I would do things to try to force myself to talk more or force myself to be more outgoing or to be some other person than really what I was. And when I started to actually just be myself and be who I am, I started to feel more comfortable. I could tell the people around me, they knew that was really me. And that's just the answer, right? Is just being authentically ourselves. I mean, that's a big revelation that you had. And I appreciate you sharing that because now you're able to just be free,
Oh my
like you're
God,
able
it's
to,
so nice.
it's nice, isn't it? Like there's no pressure, there's no standards you have to worry about meeting or anything like that. So that's awesome.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, just the other day we were on vacation in Myrtle Beach, and um, a random music video came on in the Airbnb. And like in the past, I'd probably just be like either sitting there, like just kind of talking to whoever. But my friend turns around and looks at me, and I'm just sitting there dancing, like just doing weird dances. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And she's cracking up. Like old me never would have started dancing randomly. And just like having her laugh and having her react to that, just me being a goofball, it was so freeing. And for the rest of the weekend, every time we were out, I was just dancing and just being my weird, goofy self. So it really is freeing um, to know that, like, I feel like it's the closest that I've ever gotten with this friend of mine because she really got to see the real me this weekend.
Introverts are too quiet and too weak to lead. Have you ever heard this before? Well, my name is Terrence, and for years as an introvert, I didn't think I had what it took to be a leader. What I learned was being an introvert is my superpower. If you want to learn how to have success as an introvert, then go to quietvoicefearlessleader.com to learn more. That is awesome. That's awesome. Someone is listening to this right now and they may not have that freedom yet. They may still, you talked earlier about, your career and your job and feeling like you had to be a certain way or meet a certain standard. For the person that's listening to this, that they're not quite there. Like they still care about people or they still care about the thoughts of others, or maybe they would have been in that car and wanted to dance, but maybe they wouldn't have because they would have been thinking, oh, the Uber driver is going to look at me a certain way or this person's going to, make a face or something. What do you say to someone like that?
I think the first thing that you should ask yourself is like, why do you care what like how they are gonna respond? Like, and I know that's a hard question to ask, but like get really honest with yourself. First, do you care? Do you actually care, or is that just a mean voice in your head? And then
Yeah.
if the answer is yes, like why? Why? If you're especially with the Uber driver or random stranger, like you're never gonna see them again. So why do you care? I think, and that once I started asking myself that question, I realized, I really don't. Um, like either they're gonna accept me and embrace me, or they're not my people. Like you can't lose when you think that way. So I would say start with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great advice. No, that's a great way to look at it. So I want to go back to this you finding out that you were an introvert. So like I guess that discovery for you and the journey and everything like that, do you feel like you've changed, or do you feel like you this has always been within you? And the reason I ask this is, for some people, because really the spectrum of introversion and extroversion, it's just a scale. We're all
Mhm.
somewhere along that scale. And some people talk about when they were younger, maybe they were more extroverted, and as they get older, they become more introverted, or the inverse, where someone maybe when they're younger, they have more of an introverted, reserved nature, and they get older and they find themselves being more gregarious and talking more and loud, right? So they become more extroverted. Were you was introversion, you think, always within you and always a part of you, or is it something that like you grew into it and as you began to go inward, you started to discover it? What do you think?
That's such a good question. So it's funny because if you ask most people that knew me as a child and even like a young adult, they would probably say, "Oh yeah, like she's an introvert," because I was shy. I was all the stereotypes, all the negative, like weird and awkward and quiet and didn't really want to talk and often stumbled over my words. And I don't really think that those things have anything to do with being an introvert, but I was what people would describe as what a lot of people might attach to being an introvert. Now, when people meet me, they are so shocked that I call myself an introvert. They're like, "Are you really? You seem so extroverted and loud and outgoing and what have you." But I feel more in tune with my introversion than ever before. Um, and I think it just now that I have the whole picture of myself, now that I have such a deep connection with my heart and soul, and just who I am to my core, I feel like more of an introvert than ever, but I feel like other people would probably describe me as an extrovert on the outside. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. It absolutely does, because I hear that a lot from people. I interviewed someone a few weeks ago. She said something very similar. Jeanette Gadet. She's a body language expert. Like she is into body language, and she's a very, like, when you talk to her, very energetic person. Just very
Mm.
like, you would automatically assume she's an extrovert, but
Right,
she's 100% an introvert. I mean, I was talking to her, and a lot of the things we could really resonate with. And I think it just speaks to the fact, and I didn't realize this, but the more research I've done and the more people I meet, you realize that introversion is not just one box.
hmm
Like, we're not all just one thing. You have some
right,
introverts that will be very reserved in a new setting, and other introverts that might be very talkative. I mean, there are different, scales, but I think at our core, we share a lot of similarities, like at our
right.
core, But it's really interesting to hear you say that. So for you, someone might see you and interact with you and say, oh, yeah, Stephanie's an extrovert, but not realizing that you do look inward and you probably do recharge from time alone and you probably
Oh
do need
yeah.
some of that space as well. So that's interesting.
Absolutely. And I feel like now more than ever, I need more time to recharge than I've ever needed in my life. And I don't know if that's just me getting older or maybe I'm just slightly addicted to going inward. Like, I love it. I love talking to myself. But yeah, it's so interesting because, like you said, I think introversion just takes on so many forms and it doesn't look the same day to day. Like, yesterday I sat at the office for the first 3 hours and I had my beats on. I was like, do not talk to me. I don't want to hear from anyone. And then, right now I'm talking to you and it's easy. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, one thing I wanted to ask you about, I wanted to talk to you about journaling.
hmm
Because I've seen you talk some about that in some of your content, and even like in your profile, I see you mention about journaling, and it's something that I actually want to get into myself. Um,
yeah.
I've been wanting to do more of. I mean, as a writer, I love writing anyway.
hmm
But I have found that sometimes with journaling, because I have done it in the past, and you'll write things and you'll go back and read what you wrote, and it's like, wow, I cannot believe I was thinking that at that time. Um, what would you say are some of the benefits for people listening of journaling? Of just what are the benefits of that, and what are the reasons that you think it'd be good for someone to do?
I think so. For me, journaling, I have a weird relationship with journaling. I'm going to be completely honest. For the first couple of years and until recently, I feel like I was journaling just to turn around and share it on my Instagram and like with my community.
Mm,
And so it was beneficial to a point, but because I wasn't doing it for me, it was I almost feel like I was holding back. I was not really saying how I actually felt because the the intention behind it was always like, okay, how am I gonna turn my life into content? How am I gonna find meaning behind this situation? How am I gonna how are other people gonna interpret this? And now I'm in this phase of like I'm journaling with the sole intention to speak to myself. It's really a dialogue with Stephanie, and I don't care what other people think about it. It's not for anybody else's eyeballs unless I say it is. And I'm not trying to interpret what things mean when I'm getting it out. So I think that the most important thing with journaling to understand is the intention behind it. Who are you doing it for, and what is the purpose behind each journaling session? And if you're finding that you're holding back, like ask yourself, what am I resisting? What's the issue here? What is blocking me right now? And I think that's the biggest thing. I don't know if I answered your question. I'm kind of rambling, but this is how I journal. I'm journaling right now.
um, yeah, no, that was a very transparent answer, and I appreciate it. I appreciate that because you're willing to admit that sometimes you would journal and you would do things for the sake of content.
Mm-hmm.
And Stephanie, I'm gonna be honest with you, I've done the same thing. There have been times where I've done lives. There have been times where I've recorded reels and certain
Mm-hmm.
things. And in the back of my mind, the reason I was doing it was I wanted to see how many comments I could get or how many likes.
Yeah.
It really wasn't at its core to really help people, which
Mm-hmm.
that's truly the reason for what I do. But there have been
Right.
times where I've done that. I posted something, and what is so crazy, it's so crazy, it never fails with me. I don't know why this is, but whenever I post something that's not genuine, it doesn't do well.
No, of
It just
course.
doesn't anyway. So,
Right.
I appreciate your transparency because I think that could help someone listening to this as well, right? Like somebody that they do things at times to impress people or to get a reaction or, just to feel better or whatever the case might be. And they're doing it for that as opposed to the genuine purpose of why they should.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to help somebody because ultimately, if we're being authentic and if we're doing things for the right reasons, then I think it ends up a lot better for us. So, I appreciate you sharing that.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of part of why I'm in this era right now of like burning my whole brand to the ground. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just whatever. And the reason for that is because I need to get to a point where I'm sharing like from my soul. And the only way that I can do that is if I focus right now and if I spend my time right now journaling for Stephanie and occasionally if I want to share snippets and little tidbits of that I can maybe somebody will benefit from that, but right now I'm solely journaling for me, and eventually maybe I'll go back and find some golden nuggets, maybe I won't, but I'm really at the point where I'm doing this for me, and yeah.
That's good. That's good. No, that's awesome. And I think a lot of us, we need to do that from time to time. We need to really go inward. We need to really ask ourselves, why do I do the things that I'm doing? Why am I here?
Hmm.
What's really the purpose of what I'm doing? So I admire that, and that's awesome. So let me ask you, Stephanie, can you talk a little bit about your book club? I think that book clubs are awesome. Um, as an author, I really love just talking to organizers of different book clubs and hearing about the purposes of them and everything. So could you just share a little bit about your book club?
Yeah, absolutely. So I used to be a reader, like a big reader. Um, a little background behind that is I have a severe hearing and sight loss. So it's very hard. It's very hard for me to watch TV and watch movies and stuff. So growing up, I read so many books. Closed captions were not a thing when I was younger. Um, and that was really my sole way to like escape and get out of my own head and learn other people's stories. But now we're in this day and age where I can watch YouTube and there's captions and TV has captions, and I really lost touch with just sitting down with a hard copy book and getting lost in the story. And so I
Mm.
really want to reconnect with my love of reading. I think it's so important. We're thinking about having kids in the next year or two, and I really want to be a good role model for my child someday, and I want to be a reader. So that's kind of a long version. I want to get back into reading, and I need some accountability. Um, so I wanted to start a book club to because I know that if I'm doing it with other people, I'll actually stick to it. I won't just say I'm gonna do it. So I'm like, why not start a book club for introverts within my introverted community, and try to feature introverted authors um, like so yeah, that's kind of the idea behind it. I love to talk, I love to analyze, I love to kind of break down what's going on in the story, and I figured it would be kind of fun.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So for people that want to join the book club, because I love the idea, by the way, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Like a book club
Yay.
for introverts. I mean, I think that reading in a society where everyone has an iPhone and everyone has iPads, and to me, it's kind of sad. Like when you go to a restaurant and you see families where the entire family, everyone is on their iPad, no one's
Oh,
having a conversation or talking.
right,
I can remember growing up, and I would have books with me everywhere. Like literally
right.
anywhere I went, I'd take a book because I just love to read. So I can really identify with what you were describing. So I just really champion what you're doing with that. I think that's amazing. So for anyone that's interested or might want to be a part of your book club, do you have any information for how they could join that?
Yes. Well, first, before I even give that information, I do want to say the very first book is by yours truly. It's by Terrence Lee. It's called Quiet Voice, Fearless Mind or Fearless Leader. I always forgot.
Fearless Leader.
Fearless Leader. Okay. Well,
Yep.
I'm halfway. I'm like halfway through it, and it's so good. And I just need other people to talk about it with. So that's going to be the first book. And I love the fact that you're the author, so we can actually ask you questions. Um, but that's going to be hosted inside of my Facebook community, which is called the Community for Introverts. I'm just trying to keep things simple. Um, and yeah, it's called the Community for Introverts. We'll probably do the book club through Zoom, and I think we're gonna start it sometime in late July, early August. You and I have to figure out the logistics, but
Yep.
we'll get there.
Yep, yep, awesome. And I am super excited to be a part of it, and I'm honored to be a part of it as well. And so I'm going to have everything in the show notes for people to be able to click the link and join the book club. And I would love to see everyone listening to see you on the first session of this because, again, I just think it's so important, as introverts, as just people, right? that, you know, we get back into the love of reading, the love of books. I just think it's really awesome. So thank you, Stephanie, for everything that you're doing, and I cannot wait to be your first guest.
Oh, it's going to be so much fun. And if anybody hears this episode later, I'm thinking that we'll probably record the Zooms so people can go back and rewatch. I've never done a book club before, so we're going to figure this out as we go.
There we go. Hey, that's the way to do it. Awesome. Well, hey, Stephanie, this has been so much fun. I mean, I feel like we could probably talk for hours. I mean, this has been such a great conversation. And for everybody listening, I did not have a topic or anything today. This was just, you know, hey, I got on the the line with Stephanie. We just started talking, and I think it was such a genuine conversation, and I just appreciate you being on.
Oh, I love this so much. This literally just lit up my whole day. So thank you so much. And I'm so excited to connect with anybody that resonated. If you guys want to reach out, my DMs are always open. At Journey of an Introvert. So I just love to talk, as you can see.
Awesome.
It's kind of weird for an introvert, right?
Yeah. Well, hey, you know, nothing wrong with good conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for being on, Stephanie.